Hey everyone, I'm Daniel Hoffman-Zinnel, Executive Director at One Iowa, and I have the amazing community leader Suku Radia here with me today, and we're going to talk about his life, his involvement in our community, his leadership at Bankers Trust. He recently retired just this year as of January 1, correct?
Correct.
And is still active and engaged in our community. He's somebody that I have personally looked up to as a leader because of his passion for our community, his involvement in so many things. I don't know how he did it, but we'll talk about that today. But he's just somebody that I've always looked up to as a leader, and I'm just so appreciative that he's taken the time to meet with me today. This is my first time meeting him, and it's been you've been a person that I've really wanted to get to know in our community as well. Well, I know you've been really involved in our community and have been a huge leader with a variety of different nonprofits, and especially like Greater One Partnership, things related to growing Central Iowa, and especially related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So how do you determine what are you passionate about, and how did you determine what initiatives you would be involved and engaged in?
Well, the inability to say no probably, I have to apologize for this, but I've always been chronically sleep deprived. So when I had my annual physical, my physician said, I've noticed every time you come here you yawn a lot, so you're not getting much sleep. And I said, well, I've really been involved in the community, as you know, et cetera, et cetera. So he gave me a prescription to carry in my billfold. And here's what it says. It says no. Wants me to say no.
Can I get one of those?
So every year when I have my annual physical, he says, have you used the prescription? And I say, no. So that's how I got involved as I did. So, forgive my digression, but I had to show that to you.
That's
simply
amazing.
because I have this inability to say no because I love helping people. But more importantly, very early on, I became fairly passionate about United Way because I wanted to be a volunteer, wanted to try to find causes that specifically dealt with women and children. I was raised in a culture where women took a back seat to men, and that was very troubling to me. It was the notion the woman's place is in the kitchen. And in some sense, I was probably rebelling against that culture, but I came to the United States and I found that there were a lot of wonderful causes that the United Way agencies support, etc., and it deals with women and children. So I became involved with United Way and have been a volunteer for over 40 years. And so, United Way has been a very big part of my life, and I'm the only person in this community who probably can say this because I've chaired the United Way campaign twice. You need to have your head examined if you do it twice. Nobody else has done it twice. But that's a different issue. My point simply being that as I became more and more involved in the community, what I found was that from a pure development standpoint, it's really good because it broadens your skill set about team building, about running a meeting, etc., etc. So, you don't ever go into these things aspiring to be the chair of the board or anything of that sort. You do it because it's the right thing to do. And it's about giving back. I call it paying my civic rent. And so I always encourage others. I do a lot of mentoring. And I always tell people that you need to have a work-life balance. It's pretty important to have a work-life balance. But make sure that along the way, get involved in a couple of organizations for which you have a passion. Don't overextend yourself because otherwise you'll end up like me.
Because how many are you still involved with?
I was involved with 18 at one time.
Oh my gosh.
It was just crazy. But I had a lot of really great people at the bank. My secret was very simply hire really smart people and stay out of their way. But go in once in a while so people think you're working.
What inspired you to be an ally and speak out in support of the LGBTQ community?
It's a great question. Well, I have never tried to look at somebody in the context of saying, well, based on the color of their skin or their gender preference or anything of that sort. I'm a minority. I was singled out at the airport one day, and I was strip searched
Wow.
by the TSA. And it was humiliating, but I also know that there's nothing I could do about it. In Des Moines, in Iowa, I said to myself, when something like that happens to you, you kind of tell yourself, think of how other people are treated. And it's not good to feel like you're a second class. Nobody should be made to feel that they're a second class citizen. I still remember when Terry Branstad decided to run for governor the second time. He'd had 4 terms. Came into my office and put an envelope, and he wanted a $1,000 check. And I said, well, Governor, you have to give me some assurance that you are actually going to not support the Republican Party platform about civil marriage and all this type of stuff. And he looked at me and he said, I have to go along with the party, and I believe that the church's belief about marriage should be between a man and a woman. I said, not every church subscribes to that, etc. I said, when you change your mind, I'll give you some money. And I handed him the envelope back.
Wow.
That was,
Yeah.
in some sense, somebody would argue and say that was a stupid thing to do. I would argue, no, it was absolutely the right thing to do. At least he knows where I stood. It's one of those where I'm a very big believer in supporting people who are oppressed, if you will, because nobody should have to feel like that. It's just that simple.
Yeah.
It really is. For me, this is, I want to be on the right side of things, and to me, the right side of things in this particular case is so obvious that perhaps probably what really troubles me right now is, like it or not, what's going on in Washington, D.C. vis-a-vis civility or nothing overt about supporting the LGBTQ community. That's very troubling. Very, very troubling.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think about this and say, I'm an immigrant. Except for the Native American Indian, everybody in this country is an immigrant. But I don't think our current president quite accepts it that way, so I won't go there.
Well, when we created this Leadership Institute, we obviously wanted LGBTQ people to be part of it, but we also wanted to specifically target women, the transgender community, and people of color, so that we were able to get more of that broader representation, really create that pipeline to leadership. So I think that speaks to people who experience oppression or marginalization usually develop some empathy for others, and I think that's kind of what you're speaking on for how you developed that empathy and what drove you to really be in support of the LGBTQ community. Shifting gears a little bit, what advice would you give specifically that you haven't maybe talked about already for our LGBTQ Leadership Institute participants as they're trying to figure out how they can be involved in the community and how they can utilize their passions and expertise to serve the greater purpose?
Well, first and foremost, I would say, don't ever be apologetic if you are part of that community. I don't think you have to take a back seat to anybody. That's pretty important. Secondly, what I would also say is, get involved. It's great for your broad development, leadership development, etc. But don't take a back seat, obviously. And furthermore, have a passion for it, because you will give it your all if you have a passion for it. And I would also say that there are people in this community, because Des Moines is what it is, you do have access to a number of CEOs. And if there's an opportunity where someone is speaking, it's a CEO of an organization, speaking to a young people's organization, etc., try to listen to see what they have to say, and you will probably find that, generally speaking, most people get it. They understand that we have to cater to the next generation. It used to be that people would say Iowa is boring and move away and all this. Now
people are coming here. Yeah.
People are coming back.
Yeah.
So let's continue to cater to the next generation. I think that becomes really, really important. So being involved is important.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we've talked about, I think, a lot in our Leadership Institute classes is many of our participants are wanting to get involved so that they can create a world that will be better for that
Absolutely.
next generation that we didn't have
Absolutely.
as
Yeah,
children
exactly.
or as youth.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
I think
and I think
that's
that's pretty important.
yeah.
The late Jimmy Valvano, who was the coach at North Carolina State, he said, "Don't give up. Don't ever give up." And I kind of agree with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, just don't give up.
Yes.
You can't give up.
That's right.
And you're always going to get those people who have their blinders on. And my view has always been, I don't care about them. If I'm not going to go change the world, I realize that. But if they are going to feel that way, it's their loss.
That's right.
You know,
Yeah, we can't change
you
that.
can't change that, right?
One thing I have noticed in talking with you, you're very humble. So do you think that humility and humbleness has been a part of your success as a leader?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm humble because the way I was raised, very simply, was it's okay to turn the other cheek, if you will. But the reality is, humility and humor, my two H's. And I love to laugh. And when I was the CEO of Bankers Trust, I'm sure there were many people who thought I had, as my wife would say, "Honey, you have one screw missing and one loose." And I'm sure they felt the same way. But, the reality is that you have to laugh in life because you can't take it too. I always told people, please, take your work seriously, but don't take yourself seriously.
Yeah.
And also, there's nothing wrong with being humble. It's a we game as opposed to an I game. And so, it's one of those where we try to do things right as a community, and you just hope that along the way, you can try to get people to understand that if somebody is part of the gay community, there's nothing wrong with them. Absolutely nothing wrong with them. And there are a lot of people who have conventional thinking that this is the way it should be. I remember going to Napa Valley once and staying in a place where the two proprietors had moved from a small town in Iowa. They were both married, and they realized they were gay. They took care of supporting their ex-wives and children with alimony and child support. But they were in a town where this was not going to be tolerated. So as I was talking to them, one of them looked at me and said, "Now you got a curious look on your face, why?" And I said, "I'm doing some estate planning for a person who has the same last name as you." And I said, "Here's his name and here's where he lives." And he said, "That's my father."
Wow.
And I said, "Interesting." I said, "He's talked about one son and one daughter." He said, "Well, I'm that other son that he won't talk about. He's basically given up on me and doesn't want to have any relationship with me." Came back, talked to the father, and I said, "You probably got a few months to live. You got cancer. Do you want to go to your grave knowing that you never, ever expressed your love for your son just because he happens to be gay?" And he said, "That son does not exist." And I said, "Well, you're going to have to let your conscience be your guide." About a week later, I got a phone call. Said, "I want to get together." Came back, said, "I want my lawyer in the meeting." We changed the will. So now it was going to go to 3 beneficiaries. And he made peace with his son. And about 2 weeks later, he died.
Wow.
But, I told myself, I said, what little I had to do with it was simply trying to knock some sense into the father. Yeah, but, I think he died a happy man. So
That's impressive. What other advice would you give to aspiring leaders out there?
Always believe that, well, first you have to believe in yourself. You really have to believe in yourself. And just remember that you have to care about others and accept the reality. When John Hume, who was an Irish politician, received the Nobel Peace Prize, in his speech, he concluded with The only thing we have in common is diversity. So let's celebrate it every day. And I think it was pretty profound. It was much longer than that, but that's kind of the bottom line. And I kind of look at this and say, my advice would be to make sure that you care about others, care about giving back, and believe in yourself. That's probably really what it comes down to.
I think that's great advice.
The only other thing I would tell you is, people at a certain generation, as they're out of college for a few years, they don't always have the ability of writing a check. And that's okay. Become involved, because it's not just giving of your financial resources, it's also about your personal resources, volunteer, etc. So that's
Time,
about
talent, or treasure,
exactly,
right? Yeah.
absolutely, yeah, exactly. You got it. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Suku, for sitting down and talking with me today. It's been fascinating to hear your story and how you got to be where you are today, and we're so grateful, I think, as a community, that you've been a part of our community for so long, and I think it's just amazing to think about the impact you've had. You probably don't even realize the impact you have had on the community. Just alone, those 18 organizations you were involved in at one point in time, and the number that you probably have been engaged with your entire lifetime. So we're so grateful for Suku to spend time with us, and I hope you have been able to capture some ideas and thoughts for you as an aspiring leader to be an engaged leader in our community. And thank you again for tuning in.